Colombia, Medellin, check. 1, 2, 3. Medalla, check. All right, I'm rolling.
When you played football, how much bigger was you?
I was about 15 pounds heavier.
So you look like a punter now, and then you were.
Yeah, so I mean, I always got referred to as the punter or kicker, anyways. But I think that comes with the Hispanic thing going on. 5'10", Hispanic kid, gotta be the kicker.
Yeah. Soccer went south.
Yeah, exactly.
Got thrown out of the prep school for soccer. What high school?
I did Christopher Columbus High School. I did grow up playing soccer. My dad was a college soccer player.
Did you ever kick in high school?
And I did kick in high school actually, but we had a dedicated kicker, so I was more kickoff guy. And then I hurt my hip my senior year, and my coach was like, "Yo, you're done kicking. Like, why do I have my star wide receiver kicking?"
Yeah. All right, we're good. Okay, we're rolling. It's back. Where am I looking? This camera. Welcome, another episode of Talking with Tags, episode number 4. Today we have an amazing guest who's actually coming on board to be part of the Home Team Mortgage in Doral, in the Miami area. So without further ado, Erik Lora.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming. It's been a good time. So those who you don't know, I first met you maybe 2-3 weeks ago. I walked in here, we started talking. You have a very interesting story on athletics growing up. So tell everybody where you grew up and that whole story as a child, and how you are where you are now.
Yeah, so I grew up in Miami, Florida. Was raised around here in the Kendall area. Played Optimus Sports at West Kendall Optimus. Went to high school at Christopher Columbus High School, pretty local, Westchester area. And man, just had a wonderful growing up experience here. My parents were very involved. Did every sport kind of growing up. And then once I got to high school, I focused on football and track. Was fortunate to get a full scholarship to go play football up at Eastern Illinois University. A little smaller FCS school, but man, had a great, Jimmy Garoppolo was kind of the.
So I want to rewind back. Now, fast forward back. So now you have Pop Warner in South Florida. Like, people in New York, New Jersey, they're good in football, but it's nothing like it is in South Florida, right? You see Pop Warner games in South Florida. Like, my friend just moved to Boca, his kid's playing. I said, you better get a bulletproof vest, because it's different than the little leagues in New Jersey. So how is it playing? You're Cuban?
Cuban, yep.
Cuban receiver in against these schools in Liberty City and all these areas. What was Pop Warner like with the parents and the fans and the craziness?
Yeah, it's a good question. South Florida football culture is just ingrained in who we are down here. So you see at local Pop Warner games, you're talking about 6 to 12-year-olds, and the whole community's out watching. There's people betting on games. It is a serious South Florida football culture down here, and it trickles into the players, it trickles into the games, it trickles into how you grow up, and really the football product that ultimately you become, right? And so my football experience was typically, we were again out west, kind of a Cuban park, a lot of Cubans, a couple African Americans, and no, so I'm a little bit more south. Okay. So it was West Kendall Optimus. Okay. We were the West Kendall Dolphins, and to be honest, early on in my career, we got killed by a lot of the good Pop Warner teams, the Gwen Cherries, the Miami Gardens, the Florida Cities, and those types of teams. And then ultimately, the FedEx League came out, and that really separated some of the more historically legacy teams that were really good and some of the up-and-coming teams, and that kind of allowed us to flourish. And so I won a couple championships through my Pop Warner career through the FedEx League, and then ultimately ended up at Columbus. But my dad was a commissioner at the park. He grew up as my football coach, soccer coach. Like, they were very involved, and I was fortunate to have such a passionate community around me, for sure.
Now, at what age did you realize that I'm good? Or did your parents realize, like, you're 8 and 9 years old, you think you're good, but you don't know? Did you realize, wow, this I'm good at this sport, I could dominate against these type of players in this? At what age did you realize this is my sport?
Yeah, so I would say my first year I was number 13. I played right guard and nose tackle, right? I think everyone needs everyone needs to get that hard entrance to football, get on the line and get dirty. By the time it was my second year, I had already really favored football. And so I actually moved to the running back position for my second year, became the starting running back, and that's really
How
when
old were you?
I was 6. I was started at 6, and so at this time I was probably 6, turning 7, in my second year, and so that was really when I was like, wow, I'm good at football. I like this sport. I'm gonna play this every year. My brother was he's 8 years older, and he kind of what got me into football. He started when he was 12, so I had already been paying attention for a few years, and then ultimately I had a really great career as a running back, but the second to last year that I was playing in Optimist, we had this kid from the local neighborhood who was just a stud athlete, and he kind of took my spot at running back. So it kind of made me transition to going to safety, and so I learned a lot about the defensive side of the ball for my last 2 years of Pop Warner.
You're like your center fielder
And I think that really grew my understanding of football in depth. And then ultimately, when I went to high school, I transitioned as a safety. So I played safety my freshman year at Christopher Columbus High School, and I did play offense a little bit. I got 6 touches and scored 3 times on the 6 touches in the whole year, right? So my varsity coach was like, yeah, I think we need to move you to the other side of the ball. Yeah. And by the time I was a sophomore, I had already gotten moved up to varsity and was playing wide receiver for varsity.
So as a young kid in Pop Warner, it was Pop Warner, right?
Yep.
Whatever. What was the most touchdowns you ever scored in a game?
Oh man, I'd probably say in the 3-4 region. Again, kind of early on in my career, we were getting killed by teams. So I think it was yeah, we scored a couple touchdowns. Let's just not get murdered. And then by the end of my career, it was, man, we're killing these teams. So I probably got a handful of touchdowns in a game. I know in college, I scored 4 touchdowns in a game, so that's kind of like...
So did Al Bundy.
Yeah.
So, Pop Warner, you're the man, Pop Warner. So now middle school, there's no high school, there's no sports in Middletown. You're still playing for the Dolphins.
Yeah, yep.
So Christopher Columbus comes up. That's a private school here in South Florida. Did they approach you, or did you apply there? How did that process work?
Yeah, so I went public school pretty much up until 8th grade, and then my parents said, hey, you're going to private, so pick between the two private schools.
What public school would you have went to?
I went to South Miami Middle School. It was a magnet school. I was part of the magnet gifted program there. And then technically my home school would have been Coral Reef. Which is another magnet school, so it aligned
like
academically.
Scuba diving team.
Yeah, it sounds academic-wise they're pretty strong, but on the football side they were very poor. And so my parents basically said, "Hey, look, you're going to either Florida Christian or Columbus." And to be honest, I didn't really favor Florida Christian. They were a much smaller school, so ultimately got accepted to Columbus and went there.
Okay, so
no brainer, by the way, sending my son there, like best school in Miami.
That's what I heard. Yes, I know the school, but I hear about it a lot. So you don't pick Columbus and you go to Coral Reef School.
Yep.
Do you go get a college scholarship?
Absolutely not. I think the foundation of what you get at Columbus is just so much more built. They have a legacy of having high quality football coaching as well as a high quality facility. Right now it's better than most small colleges.
It's like an IMG, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think ultimately what really kind of set me over was my coach, Chris Merritt, who's now the head coach at Bryant University up in Rhode Island.
Yep. They're a great 1AA school right now.
Yeah. He really tailored it to me becoming what is a local good player, athlete, get the ball in his hands and have play and become a football player. He taught me a lot of X's and O's, and I think ultimately that's what you see the big difference in South Florida high school football is coaching, but really the foundations of building a program, right? Like what you get at local public schools, the funding is way less, but not only that, ultimately you have coaches that bounce around all the time. They go from this high school to that high school, and so Coach Merritt was there for over a decade. So there was a really good foundation there, and I'm super happy I landed there.
All right, so Columbus, you have an amazing career. You were All-State.
Yep. Well, so I was third team All-State, and then first team all Dade County.
That's impressive.
Yep.
Are there any other people on that All-Dade County first team that played at the next level?
Oh yeah, I think of the like the 15 guys on the roster, I think like 9 went to the NFL. I did this. I can probably come up with some names, but really on that list there was like Aldarius Johnson, Ja'Cory Harris, Antoine Lowry, who played at Rutgers and he played at Columbus with us. Like, I mean, there's a handful of guys there.
Who was the best player you played against in high school?
Oh man,
biggest name that people wouldn't know.
Biggest name. So there's a guy named Denzel Perryman who's the starting middle linebacker for the Raiders right now.
Okay.
freaking stud middle linebacker.
Freaking
Yeah, no doubt. I would say he's probably the best guy I played against on the defensive side of the ball. But to be honest, there was a guy named Robert Sands out of Carroll City who played in the NFL, who was like an Olympic triple jumper. Again, playing in South Florida football. On the other side of the field, there could be 3 NFL players without you knowing. You know.
All right, so great high school career. Now you have to pick your college.
Yep.
So, did you get any looks from South Florida schools? How does somebody from South Florida end up in Eastern Illinois?
Yeah, so I got some looks from Sunbelt schools. At the time, Sunbelt was a little bit, they thought they were a little bit better than I think where they kind of are actually. But I mostly got preferred walk-ons from the Sunbelt schools. Realistically,
What's a Sunbelt school?
Sunbelt school, FIU, Louisiana Lafayette, Florida Atlantic was there
Southern
at the time.
Mississippi,
I think now they're
okay.
Conference USA. So a couple of the smaller FBS schools, but nobody really wanted to offer the 5'10" Hispanic kid, right? I think ultimately from a recruiting standpoint, it's much better to keep your job when you get the 6'2" guy from the big public school than the 5'10" Hispanic kid that caught 23
Danny
passes.
Woodhead had some
right?
good people on his
I think, so I think that was the struggle for me. And at the time, there wasn't anything but sending your highlight tape through the mail to coaches.
There was no huddle like
There was
now.
no huddle. There was
Twitter.
no Twitter. There was no any of that stuff. So really, it was from the ground. And I give kudos to the head coach at the time, Coach Chris Merritt, because he did a lot of groundwork for the spreading
There's
of
a
that.
lot of amazing players that never got that opportunity because their coach didn't care when they left.
Yep.
Like I always use the example of Victor Cruz, right? Victor Cruz became a superstar because somebody got him a tryout with the Giants. 5 wide receivers got hurt, and he became a star. There's so many guys that have that same talent level that never even get a chance.
Yep.
Because nobody was there to help them. So if you have these high school coaches who are so integrated with some of the college coaches, they can make a phone call you for you can get that chance you're never going to get. And then once you get to college, it's on you.
No doubt.
Like I coach a lot of kids, and at the high school level, like, listen, Michigan wants you, but guess what? There's 30 of you at Michigan. Go to Rutgers. There's only 1 or 2 of you. You're going to have a better chance to play. So that's another thing with college. You want to go to Alabama. Everybody wants to go to Alabama, Florida, but there's 50 of you there. And like when you're like a good kid in your little town, when you go to that next level, you're not the only one. Right? There's always somebody bigger and better. So what are your thoughts on that? Like you have the stud coming out of your school. He's a great wide receiver. He has an offer from Alabama, and he has an offer from Rutgers. What would you tell him to do?
So my first advice, and I work with NIL kids right now, and so the athlete mentorship, the football mentorship is part of like what I currently do, right? And so the first thing that I would tell a family, if they were choosing the school of choice, is, one, let's make sure that you're focusing on your degree, right?
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, like, I don't care how good you are as a high school player, your chances are about 1% to make it to the NFL, right? Where you're going to make the big bucks. The most important part is your education and your experience, right? The culture, do you like coaching? Are you going to get a chance to play? It's bigger than just the football aspect. If we're focusing on the football aspect, it is. You have to understand that when you go to Alabama, they're going to get top 5 linemen every year, right? That's part of their culture. That's what they do. So if you're a top 5 lineman and you want to go to Alabama, know that there's going to be incredible competition to just get on the field, let alone go to the next level, right? And so I do think you have to put that into perspective, but I think football is so complex where you almost have to look at the offensive schematics, right? What is the coach doing? How long have they been there? Are they a coach that likes to bounce around? Like, are you going to have the same coach for 4 years, or are you going to have a transition in the middle of it? Like, so those are a lot of variables that I think people don't really realize when they're picking schools. They're just like, oh, that one has cool colors, or oh my God, I've always wanted to play for this school. Well, it's a little bit more dynamic than that, and I think if you take a step back and work with your family or your supporting cast, as well as your coaches, to say, what is the right fit for me, I think you're ultimately going to come out with better results than if you just go, what's the best football school? I'm going there, right?
Gotcha. Ronnie.
Yep.
At 105, I told him to come in here. Just wait out there and tell me in 5 more minutes.
Okay.
So, you go to Eastern Illinois. What was life like playing with Jimmy Garoppolo?
Jimmy's a stud, man. He's a stud. He's a heck of a
Getting shafted
leader.
right now.
Yeah, I
He
think
should be playing somewhere.
it's politics,
Of
right?
course.
I mean,
Politics
football
and
is
business.
politics, and I think politics gets ingrained in a lot of the stuff that football is nowadays. But he's a stud. He's a tremendous leader, and he made my job easy, right? His arm talent allowed me to just really focus on what I had to do to get open, and I knew the ball was going to be there, catchable, right? And so he made my job easy. But not only that, like he was one of the hardest workers in the room. So
First
it
one
makes
in,
it
last one out kind of guy?
it makes it easy for you to work harder when you see the guy next to you working just as hard or harder than you, right? And so he's a guy that I'd follow into battle at any given moment, and
You
I
still have
think
a relationship with him?
yeah. Actually, we texted right before the San Francisco 49ers game randomly. It had been a while, and so we text back and forth every once in a while. He's a little bit hard to get a hold of,
of
you know. But
so you get to play with Jimmy Garoppolo. You had broke some records at Eastern Illinois. You won some awards. Touch on that real quick.
yeah, so fortunate. I had an amazing college career. I was able to basically break every receiving record at my school, my conference, and even held a couple NCAA records.
Most receptions in a season?
Most receptions
Still
in a
hold that one?
season. Yep. Most completions, most receptions by a duo, and then the longest
Who was
streak
the
for
other duo?
100. His name was Adam Drake. He was a guy who got a couple opportunities in the NFL as well. He was kind of Jimmy Garoppolo's number 2 option at the
So when
time.
they were doubling you, he was always open?
Yeah. That tended to happen quite a bit, but you know, really, I think to go back to your question is, you know, the advantage of having the offense that we did, which was implemented by Coach Dino Babers, who's now at Syracuse. Incredible offense. I got a lot of touches, and when I got a lot of touches, it gave me a lot of opportunities to make plays, which ultimately really changed the type of football player I was, where now instead of getting 1 or 2 catches and trying to make big plays out of it, I could be the consistently good, not occasionally great type of player, right? And so I was getting 8 to 10 touches a game, averaging over 10 yards. That's the first down every time. I was the go-to guy to get the first down, right? And so I think that changed who I was and allowed me to break some incredible records. I had I think an 8-game streak of over 100 yards, which is the FCS active record. So I broke a bunch of records. I was Walter Payton Award finalist 2 years in a row, got 4th and 7th in the voting. Jimmy won it one of the years I got 7th. But yeah, I had a great experience. Conference Player of the Year, Conference Athlete of the Year. So I won of all the sports of the Ohio Valley Conference. So yeah, I have a couple medals.
Quite a few. So now college is over, NFL.
Yep.
Do you get an agent? How does that work?
Yeah, so that was a new experience for me. And I think this is part of the guidance that I hope to one day give to my current clientele is it's tough out there. Agents are hawks as much as they are your friend, right? They want what's best for you, but ultimately they're lining their pockets, right? And so you kind of have to be strategic in who you partner with, who you create relationships with, and who you trust in the industry. There are some good actors, and I think we work with some really good ones. But you know, ultimately what you have to do is take a step back, take a deep breather, and follow your gut, follow your heart. Like, go with what your body's telling you, because you know yourself the best. A lot of people are going to tell you a lot of things, but again, they're skewed, right? Like any agent that tells you you're going to be a top round pick without multiple agents telling you you're going to be a top round pick is probably kind of pulling your chain and hoping you sign with them to kind of line their pockets, right? So, you know, figuring out what works for you is ultimately really what's best for you. And I think just trusting your gut and knowing, man, who do I trust in the industry? Who can I rely on? And going with those individuals.
All right, so draft comes, you didn't get drafted.
Yep.
You knew that was going to happen, or you had an idea?
Well, I was kind of a
Teams reached
borderline
out to
guy.
you.
I think,
Yeah.
6th or 7th round was really what was going to happen. I had one team who was really contemplating drafting me, which was the Detroit Lions. I ended up with them on my second season, but they ultimately drafted a late round wide receiver out of Notre Dame. And so again, I think you fought the FCS, big FBS, you know, when you're drafting a guy, the guy from the FBS is probably have more eyes on him, and right, it looks better on presidents and ownership. So they went with a late round wide receiver there who actually played there for a couple years. He was a good player, but that ended up kind of my demise as far as I didn't get drafted. And so it was kind of a race to get on a team and make sure I got a chance to play in the league. Now, hindsight's 50-50. I wish I would have kind of taken a little bit less haste and kind of looked at all my choices instead of picking the first choice available to make sure I was on an NFL roster. Is like, give myself 24, 48 hours to kind of pick and choose. Again, easier said than done, hindsight, right? But I did end up having multiple offers to go play for some teams, and actually some paid me more than others. I went with the Vikings because they didn't draft a wide receiver.
Okay.
Ultimately, that ended up being a bad decision for me because they had just changed their offensive coordinator and their staff. And so through the preseason, they had to get their starters a lot of reps.
Who was the quarterback when you were
Matt Castle, as well as they just drafted Teddy Bridgewater. So
Okay.
that was the quarterback battle at the time.
So
I played against Teddy Bridgewater as well in high school.
Yeah,
So
yeah, he's from
that was a
Florida.
cool connection.
So you have your cup of tea with the Vikings camp, then you go to next year to the Detroit Lions. Right?
Yep.
So at that moment, you give it 2 years. You're like, the paintings on the wall. I'm old now. These young kids are coming in. You're like, all right, now I'm going into the real world.
Yep.
So here we are today, real world. How does being a Division I athlete playing in the NFL translate into being successful in business now?
That's an incredible question, and I'm super happy you asked that, because I was talking to a high-level tech executive not too long ago, and they absolutely mentioned to me one of the attributes that they look for are hardworking, work ethic, people who aren't afraid of failure, people who are willing to go the extra mile. And I think that's what gets ingrained with you when you're in athletics, right? Working as a team, making sure that you're part of something bigger, but also focusing on your role, your responsibilities, and you're working every day at it, right? And so, that's where I think the focus needs to be when you're an athlete coming out of college, entering the real world is, man, I have incredible attributes. I've worked my whole life to get to a goal. Now I'm just changing goals, right? It doesn't change the work ethic. It doesn't
Put the
change your
shoulder pads
methodology.
down for a blazer.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're just kind of transitioning that energy and that output into something new. And it was difficult for me. I say this as a 31-year-old professional now, but when I was 25 and going through the process, I'd never had a job. I had been football my whole life, right? And so now it's like, okay, what do I do? Who am I? I'm a football player, but not playing football. So what do I want to become? How do I get there? And it is challenging. There are hurdles that you need to overcome, but it's nothing you haven't done already, right? It's just
goal.
put your head down, keep working, and ultimately success finds the people who work hardest for it. So,
I read a study that the number one hireable athlete is a wrestler.
okay.
Wrestlers, because you're by yourself, right?
Yeah.
You fuck up, you're by yourself, you're done. So with that being said, before we end the show, now with NIL deals, right?
Yep.
You missed that window, your opportunity to make money while you were in college. If you were an athlete now, with the same accolades that you had then, what would be your ideal NIL package?
Oh, wow. I went to a smaller school, so I don't think there would be as much cash involved with some of the deals. But man, I would have loved to have. I would have loved to have like maybe a couple restaurant gift cards where I could go and have a bunch of dinners with friends and stuff like that.
State, his name's on the tip of my tongue. He just gave every single player on the roster a $500 gift card to buy a suit, so when they go to the Notre Dame game, they look presentable. So you were at a smaller school, and obviously back then there's boosters.
Yep.
Money was given out. But just imagine what happened back in the day at LSU, Miami, forget it, what was going on there. Like, this is great for the kids to be able to make some money before they even get to the NFL.
So I work with NIL prospects right now, and I think the biggest thing that we're trying to instill in them is the business management side of what it is to make money, because you become a professional once you make money. Yeah, I know it's marketing dollars, not football contract dollars, but the key fact is you have to operate as a business, and now you run those things, and those leaders that are getting those NIL deals and passing them through to their teammates, utmost respect to those guys. I think that's incredible. Consciousness of understanding how your team is affected by what you're doing, but empowerment and saying, hey, I care about you. Thank you for making this happen, because I'm the star on the field, but it only happens as a team. And football is the greatest team sport in the world. Absolutely. So I think giving back to those guys is incredible. One of the gestures that sat with me the most, and Blake Bortles probably doesn't even know who I am, right? Even though we have a few connections that we know of each other. I was a wide receiver at the Jaguars at the time, and he was sponsored by this kind of smartwatch company, and he gave all the receivers a smartwatch. And I was, a guy who came in for camp. I probably wasn't going to make the active roster, but Blake Bortles came to me and gave me a little smartwatch, and that was incredibly heartwarming for me to know that, like, this guy who was a top 10 draft pick, who's incredibly up there in what marketing deals and all these things, are thinking about the smaller guys on the team, right? And understanding giving that back and how to build those and nurture those relationships. It's the same thing in business, right? I think giving gifts and building relationships with people is so important. So doing that on the field is the same as doing that off the field, and I think it's a great way to transition.
Well, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
We're looking forward to have you with part of the Home Team Mortgage now, big thing. I think we can intertwine a lot of things there.